Nintendo is discontinuing the NES Classic in NA regions. The final shipments are going to be around this April to all the retailers that are going to be selling the Switch. And basically they're saying, yeah, it's not going to be available. And their statement actually states, we're sorry for everyone that had difficulty finding the system, and we recommend that basically you talk to retailers to kind of find other ones, which is a bit disheartening considering you're canceling it. Yet you understand that people aren't able to get it and people still want it, so why are you canceling it? And a lot of people have been kind of questioning this and kind of blaming Nintendo for it. And Nintendo is probably at fault, but here we are to talk about it. Michael here with another topic video. So yeah, Nintendo is basically going to be discontinuing it, but one thing that I've seen not a lot of people really talking about is that we don't actually have a lot of information on if they're going to be discontinuing it everywhere. The statement was only sent to NA regions and actually says NOA or NA in the sort of statement and everything like that, which means that this is actually something that could be still going on in, let's say, Europe or Japan or wherever else it's actually going to be shipping from. And so we could end up seeing a case where maybe it's actually a licensing problem, and this is kind of my theory on the whole take and everything like that. And yes, Nintendo makes to make a lot of mistakes. There's a lot of things they do that just doesn't make any sort of marketing sense. It's not like they're one of the companies ends up doing the best job at their whole marketing scheme. Just look at the Wii U, for example. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if they were just like, we just don't want to make them anymore. And, you know, they could be making a bunch of money off of it, but they're just like, hey, nah, not really important. But the fact that we don't really have a lot of information on other regions, we only have this simple statement, is the fact that it could end up just being a licensing problem. Maybe they ended up having like one of the chips or something like that was not licensed for the region, or maybe some sort of marketing thing that's going on. You know, they weren't able to kind of do it because it is a Japanese company. They have a lot of traditional style businesses that go on over there, and Nintendo is definitely one of them. You can definitely see it in the way that they end up having all of their sort of marketing done. And so basically, yeah, I have a feeling it's probably just a sort of licensing issue somewhere along the line, because when I ended up searching around, I was not able to find any information about them discontinuing it anywhere else. It's still being produced in Japan. It's still being produced in Europe. So it's possible that maybe they just had a certain kind of licensed amount that they were going to produce and like, oh yeah, I won't sell more than this, which this goes on to Nintendo. You know, Nintendo kind of underestimated how popular it would end up being, which surprises no one. And so basically they're just like, yeah, we can't make anymore, so we just have to discontinue it. And they're not necessarily going to be open about this, because this happens a lot. This happens a lot more than people kind of realize. I actually did a video quite a while ago about the Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse, which was the fact that Disney's sort of license with Sega ended up running out, and so Sega could no longer sell the game because basically they couldn't actually sell the property of Mickey Mouse anymore. And so, yeah, they just never ended up kind of renewing it. And this happens a lot. You know, it happens with GTA all the time. Things with like licensed music is the most popular one. BioShock was one of those that ended up going under that reigns, and then they were able to kind of renew it, and then the remaster came out and everything like that. But some of these companies just don't end up renewing it, and so it just ends up not being able to be sold anymore. And what's strange is that Nintendo is saying that this is going to be the end of it. However, I'm not 100% sure if it will be, but at the same time, if it's not, Nintendo probably would have ended up stepping up and being like, oh, well, we're going to have a stall in shipments. This would also kind of also explain these sort of shortages as well, not just with the Nintendo Classic or the NES Classic, but also the Switch as well. So maybe they have like certain licensing deals with the companies that are producing these machines that have a sort of limit on the number that they can end up selling, because if they're actually going through Japanese companies, it's very possible that they have that sort of structure to their licensing. That's how a lot of this sort of licensing stuff in Japan goes. Like Japanese car companies, for example, they only have a certain amount that they can produce under their license, and they have to pay a bunch more for, you know, extended licensing. And so that's actually one thing that I think a lot of people are ignoring. Now, obviously, there's a bunch of other theories. Now, one theory is the fact that, oh, the NES Classic is taking away from the Switch sales, which I don't think that's really the case. And if it is the case, Nintendo, you're a freaking moron, because, yeah, it's just, they're completely two different systems with two completely different audiences. Because while the NES Classic is kind of cool, I don't really see a lot of value in it, but it's for those people that like have nostalgia for the NES, and they're like, oh yeah, well, I'd love to have a little NES thing, like even though it's not the original NES, because the original NES was kind of a pain to work with in some cases. It was just kind of nice to have something that kind of looks like it, and it's from Nintendo. It's not one of those kind of sort of off-brand things to where it's like, yeah, well, this is sort of a retro console, but it's really just an emulator, which the NES Classic is just an emulator. So, you know, it is one of those things where it's just like, it's a completely different market. So I don't really necessarily think that is the case. The other case that I could sort of agree with is that they could be sort of taking this as a way to kind of take away from their digital sales of these older style games. For example, you can end up looking at, sorry, there's a itch on my neck. Anyways, you can end up looking at it to where it's taking away digital sales of classic titles, such as, their NES Classics is on there, which, yes, sort of. I guess that would be the case. I could easily see Nintendo sort of doing that, especially since how against they are on emulation. They think that emulation is just taking away all of their sales, when realistically, if they sold their products logically, or hey, if they made their own emulator and sold emulation ROMs, then, they wouldn't actually be cutting out of their profits whatsoever. If anything, it would actually be earning them money for a lot of reasons, because I know there's certain people that never even tried the NES, and then they end up playing it through an emulator and like, oh, this game's awesome, and then they end up having this sort of post nostalgia, I'm gonna call it, for the NES, because they're like, oh yeah, these classic games are awesome, and then they end up playing it on it, like, let's say an NES Classic or something like that. They end up buying it on a virtual console. That's sort of a way a lot of those things go. And I know that's not going to be a majority. I know some people just emulate because, hey, it's difficult to get a lot of these games and stuff like that. I like to only emulate games that I do own. At least that's what I try to do. Sometimes that can't be the case, but hey, that's how it goes. So yeah, that is another theory as well. The other theories are basically going down to the whole marketing thing of, it's taking away sales and things like that. And then maybe a kind of misinterpretation of like the amount that they're going to end up developing. And so basically they would have a sort of in-between era. Now, this doesn't really make sense because of the sort of production line of the Nintendo Switch and the Wii U, but some people are saying that it may be a case of this was just to fill up factory space. And so basically they had the Wii U production ended, and then they were going to start up the Switch production, which realistically the Switch production would have started a little bit earlier than that, because I feel like by the time the Wii U ended up stopped producing, they would have at least been building sort of dev kits and prototypes of the Nintendo Switch. So I don't necessarily think this is the case, but some people are saying that maybe the Nintendo Classic was just sort of a design to throw out there to kind of fill up that gap, so that the companies had something to develop during that time, so that they could keep the factories going, and maybe it would be licensing and everything like that, which sure, maybe that is a potential cause, but it also doesn't mean that they would end up stopping the production on these things, because they're not going to be particularly expensive. I mean, you can build one of these things for like $30. They're selling them at $60. There's no way they're making a loss on it. And I'm talking about, consumer prices. If they're a company that's buying, over 1 million units, like I think it was like 1.5 million units or something like that they've sold in the NA region, which is freaking ridiculous. I don't even know how many people actually were looking forward to it and that would actually spend that amount of money. But hey, I guess people enjoy it quite a bit, and it's been selling like crazy. It's been out of stock everywhere. Around here, I can actually find it in the store. There's a Walmart near me that I can just go and pick it up if I want it, which actually isn't too far. Well, I see it near me. It's like 10 miles away. But regardless, I can actually go and pick one up. So in my region, it's not particularly popular, and maybe I should pick one up because there are scalpers everywhere, which they might be gone now. I don't necessarily know how that's going. I feel like there's some scalpers in my region that probably would have ended up picking it up. But, it's not popular everywhere, so it kind of, surprised me how everyone's just like, I can't find one. And I'm like, I just saw one at the store the other day. It's not a big problem for me. But at the same time, that's not the case everywhere. So maybe it's one of those cases to where, yeah, maybe it was just filling up production line, and that is perfectly possible. I think that is probably one of the second most logical reasons, I think, next to my own. Obviously, I'm going to think my own is the best one because, haha, I'm arrogant, rah, rah. Not really. It's one of the ones that I believe could be the case. And I don't think it necessarily is, because the production on these things are not going to be expensive, which means they could end up having a small factory doing it. You don't have to keep up major production on these sort of things. There's a lot of things that end up having reduced production over long periods of time. For example, the Wii. The Wii was not in full production the entire time it was in its lifespan. It obviously slowed down as they decided to cut down on costs for production and produce other things, because you can't continually sell 10 million units a week or anything like that. Obviously people are going to own it, and so they're not going to buy a new one every single week. That's not how it goes. And so, yeah, production would end up slowing down regardless. So I don't think that's the case, although it is somewhat likely. But yeah, overall, it kind of sucks if you're looking for a Nintendo or a NES Classic or whatever the hell they're calling it. It's called a NES Classic, right? I got that right? Also, is there a cave here? I just now realized on my map there is a thing there that is not reachable. Oh, I think I'm supposed to go inside a tree. Oh, what the hell is this? Oh my god, I am finding a bunch of stuff in this game. Playing Black Desert in the background, by the way. Anyways, yeah, so it sucks for people that were looking for an NES Classic. It's just, yeah, it's unfortunate for people that wanted one because it's so difficult to get. And so if you're looking for one, now you have to end up doing all the scalper stuff because Nintendo really isn't profiting from making it rare. I think there is a case that it could end up coming back if I'm right, and it is just a licensing problem. We could end up seeing it come back to where they end up fixing these licensing issues, and then everyone's like, oh, hey, yeah, they're back again, everything like that. Or maybe you can end up importing it. If I'm not just finding the sources, maybe they are discontinuing it everywhere. I didn't find any sources that said so, but I could easily just be missing it and everything like that. So that entire point could end up being mute because of that. But at the same time, if that's the case, you know, you can end up importing it and stuff like that. I don't know if they're region locking it. I don't think they can. I don't necessarily know how all that works. I don't have an NES Classic because, like I said, I don't really see a lot of value in it. I'm not somebody who's against emulation, and I don't necessarily think that having this little tiny box is a good thing. I don't even have a TV, to be honest. I have my, you know, monitor, and that's what I hook literally everything up to. Like, if I want to play a console, I end up hooking it up to my monitor. And so, yeah, it's not necessarily something I'm going to be too concerned with. But at the same time, it is something that sucks for a lot of people because it is a cool collector's item. I could easily see somebody who's like a Nintendo collector being like, oh yeah, I want one of these. You know, you would have the original, but then you would also have like this upgraded version that looks really cool and everything like that. Like, because it does look kind of nice. I like having these newer style consoles. I just wish they would end up producing the old consoles again. But I think that that comes down to a fact that these things are not easy to produce when they're actually that old. Like, let's say, you know, like an original NES, getting the original hardware for that thing would probably not necessarily the easiest thing to do, because you'd be like, oh, well, now we have to go and reproduce these sort of chips. It's not something that's going to be like, oh, we're already producing these types of chips or whatever. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Michael with another topic video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this one. The game in the background has been Black Desert. It's a really fun MMO I've been like playing constantly recently. So yeah, that's why I'm playing in the background again. And yeah, so if you guys have any thoughts or any theories or anything like that that you didn't end up seeing, here's that cave. Jesus Christ. If you have any theories or anything like that, make sure to leave them in the comments. If you end up finding any information on what about other regions for this sort of thing, you know, make sure to throw it my way as well, because I did some searching. I've been searching over the last few days. This isn't new news. It's been out for a few days. But, you know, it is sort of news that I'm like, I don't necessarily know what's going on because I can't really find a lot of sources. All I can find is canceled in the NA regions, and we don't really have any other words on the other regions. But I could easily be missing the information. So if I'm missing that information, make sure to send it my way. And like I said, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this one. And I will see you guys in the next video. And I'm going to explore this cave. I like the caves. Oh my god, bats. I hate bats.